Thank you for joining us for today's webinar on Procurement 14 Best Practices. This is the first of a four-part series from Next Level Purchasing Association, and I'm your host, David Millington, the Director of Procurement Education for Next Level Purchasing Association. This happens to be one of my favorite courses, Best Practices. And there's much that you can learn from understanding and leveraging best practices in your work. And as we all know from the NLPA body of knowledge, the procurement function has a core purpose or mandate, and that falls into three categories. It's as simple as that: to manage spend, to support operations, and to protect our organizations from the impact of risk, and to deploy the necessary risk mitigation strategies. So it's a threefold mandate, and I urge you to really understand the best practices that go in sync with each of these three areas. If you do that, then you would be a best practice-oriented procurement professional. That is the same as, in my opinion, to being a world-class procurement professional. So why have a purchasing department? And, in all our endeavors, professionally and otherwise, we have to ask who, what, when, how, why. And asking these questions would force us to look at our environments, in this case, the procurement environment, in a very holistic manner, in a very, very systems thinking and a systems approach manner. When we ask who is in our environment, in this case, the key stakeholders, the suppliers, the customers, the owners of our organizations, and other key stakeholders. What is in our environment? The systems, the machines, the technology, the people, and the processes and the tools that we engage to deploy our functions. Those are the what's in our environments. And then we have to ask the core question, why? Why are we here? What is our mandate? What is our core purpose? Why have a procurement department? Why is it necessary to have a procurement department? Why is it not better to have the production folks do their own purchasing, the maintenance folks, the accounting folks, the marketing folks, to have all those departments do their own purchasing and procurement of the inputs and the materials that they need to execute their functions? After all, they should know what they need to execute their functions, correct? This is one argument. Of course, I'm of the opinion that it's better to have, once a company reaches a certain size, it's better to have a procurement function. But again, that procurement function must be mandate and purpose oriented. So the better we are at articulating and understanding why we are here, the better we would be at executing our function. So a well-trained procurement team, certified procurement team who understands best practices, who understands should cost model orientation, who understands buying plans, global sourcing strategies, who understand the dynamics of international procurement and the intricacies thereof, could, of course, and will, of course, be more efficient and more effective at the procurement function. And they would, of course, be held to a higher degree of accountability for executing those functions. It is very important that we are aligned to the objectives of our organizations, the overall corporate mandate or mission or vision, that we are aligned and that we align our organizations. We align with our CEOs, the C-level suite, and the senior executives. That there's alignment. And I don't know if in your organizations you have a C-level suite for procurement, the chief procurement officer or vice president of procurement, but it's very, very important that we're aligned to the corporate mandate. This will better enable us to support the operations and to understand the intricacies of each function: manufacturing, logistics, marketing, accounting, finance. We understand the risk that all of those sections or those departments face day to day, and how our function could impact those risks in a negative way. So the better we could understand those functions, we'll be better able at executing our functions and aligning to the corporate mandate. So again, the purchasing the function, well-trained staff would be more efficient, more effective, and if we are strategic in our approach and we look for the strategic alignment, then the purchasing function would be a source of support and a source of innovation, especially interacting with our suppliers to leverage innovation. And on to the next slide. We go on to best practice number 1. All right, there are 14 best practices that the course focuses on, and there are many best practices. So I urge you to understand and to deploy and to and develop a degree of expertise in executing the 14 purchasing best practices that underpin this course, but to do research and to be open to the other best practices that are out there. The course aligns the 3 procurement functions or mandates, and it aligns the 14 purchasing best practices in those areas. But the matter of utilizing an annual buying plan as part of the strategy, the overall procurement strategy, again, with understanding the corporate situation, understanding the factors that impact your organization, be there socio-demographic factors, be there ecological, be there economic or fiscal factors that are impacting your organization, the market shifts, the shifts in customer requirements, customer specifications, and customer taste, of course, underpinned by a thorough competitive analysis. Really understanding those dimensions on an ongoing basis would give you as procurement professionals good intel as to how to develop your buying plan and how to develop your procurement strategy. So my advice is to move, I advise you to move, I don't want to say move away, but to align your tactical purchasing functions with more strategic thought processes, systems thinking processes, and strategy first, and the tactics are part of your overall strategy, your procurement strategy, which is aligned symmetrically to your corporate strategy, as opposed to this tactical buying. And what are we doing this year? Well, we're going to save money, and we're going to manage spend. We're going to have the risk mitigation functions. We're going to support operations, but just solely from a tactical standpoint, without really understanding your overall corporate situation. If you don't understand the overall corporate situation, again, socio-demographic factors that impact your organizations, the ecological shifts and mindsets of customers, and this is just the physical, ecological situation, the economic trends, the political trends. I forgot to mention that earlier, and we see how that you know issues such as trade wars and trade deficits, how that impact the supply chain, and how I'm sure many of you are feeling some of the impacts of the current political climate as it relates to the supply chain. I'm sure some of you have seen a direct impact in uh, how the procurement function is to pivot and to respond. So, with that said, the better we are at understanding those factors, socio-demographic, political, economic, ecological, the understanding how the industry that your organization is and the shifts and the maturity level of the industry, really understanding your customer requirements, and again, with the mindset that an organization exists to provide value for your organizations. The better we are at understanding that, the more strategic we could be, and the better aligned that we could be with the other departments in our organizations and the organizational mandate itself. And we could be more strategic with the procurement function, and we could align the tactical procurement functions to those strategies in support of those strategies. So to understand that hierarchy is very important. So to understand and to leverage annual buying plan, of course, you would need, again, a thorough forecast, which again would be impacted by many situations. Uh, uh, um, Again, as I said it before, the customer tastes and the shifts in that. The economic situation would directly impact your forecast. And to do the necessary market research, again, in those dimensions that I mentioned, the economic, ecological, political, and just the supply of raw materials in the supply chain, and what are your competitors up to. So doing a thorough market research is important. And the approach, of course, should be tactical in support of strategic alignment, in my opinion. And part of the anatomy of a good buying plan would be, of course, your historical spending, how those patterns look, and understanding, again, the internal environment of your organization, right? In the internal fiscal situation, understanding those cost pressures, aligning again with your CFOs, and being proactive in addressing any negative impacts that you might detect, or to be proactive in leveraging a positive situation, fiscal situation in your organization, how to capitalize that, and really understanding your suppliers and their customers and your customers, and understanding their fiscal situation. So this way your buying plan could be more effective. And of course, another part of the anatomy of that is understanding your savings target. So the buying plan, when you look at all of these dimensions, is a tremendous, if done well, would be a tremendous tool to enable your organization to really leverage its procurement function. Best practice number 2, utilizing commodity teams. And the purpose of a commodity team is to ensure that all the important parameters and aspects of cost and quality and delivery of your materials that you're supposed to procure in support of operations, that the effective decisions are made, and there's a degree of collaboration. I mentioned in one of the other webinars that companies that are best able to collaborate internally and externally, so collaborate across departmental collaborations. Of course, as procurement professionals, we have to collaborate with the front end sales process, the marketing processes, Of course, everything in terms of managing spend has to be deep collaboration with the finance department and the manufacturing department. So they get all of these critical inputs and understand their interests, right? In a non-siloed way, in a very synergistic way, um, and leveraging a team of this nature and getting that buy-in and getting that support across the board would make your value stream. And of course, part of the commodity teams could be your customers and it'd be nice. And I recommend that you include your suppliers in those commodity teams. This would build a stronger value stream and a sounder and a more effective supply chain where the interests of each one of those segments and departments is looked at, understood, and integrated into your procurement decisions. And of course, leveraging a commodity team would help avoid unintended consequences. How many times have we made decisions to procure something that we looked at it in our way from our perspective, and then another department comes to us and say, well, you didn't consider this and you didn't consider that. So to avoid those unintended consequences and to reduce the total cost of ownership, a commodity team is a very, very, very good best practice to leverage. Best practice number 3, qualifying our suppliers. Very, very important. That's why I put an exclamation mark there. Qualify your suppliers. The world-class procurement professional looks beyond the smooth talking sales tactics and sales staff of your suppliers. You look beyond that. Look beyond the price, my friends. Okay? And make sure that you have a very robust mechanism to qualify your suppliers. Again, if you look at in time and time again, you'll hear me talk about systems thinking. You hear me talk about SIPOC, suppliers, inputs, process, outputs, customers. This essentially is your supply chain. This essentially is an overview of your value stream. You have suppliers who provide what? Who provide inputs, the critical inputs and raw materials that you are responsible for securing. And those raw materials and inputs are sent to your conversion or manufacturing processes that are converted into outputs that are sent to your customers. And those outputs must meet the customer specifications and requirements. SIPOC. So if we do not do a good job at qualifying our suppliers and to make sure to ensure that our suppliers are competent, our suppliers are capable, they have the process capability, they have the quality mechanisms to meet the customer requirements. If we do not ensure that, then we have not lived up to our mandate in terms of supporting our operations effectively. If we bring in an incompetent supplier who brings in to the value chain degrees of risk, defective products, dangerously sourced products, even if the processes internally in your organizations are able to, the processes are robust, they're world class. If you have poor or low grade inputs and you send them to a process that's able to execute very well and follow all the steps, the output, the result is not going to meet customer specifications, regardless of how robust those conversion and those manufacturing processes are. So if you have, as I say, mess in, mess process, mess out. So very systems thinking holistic way, SIPOC. Please understand SIPOC. If you need help with this, to deploy this methodology, shoot me an email, let me know. Okay, I'm a subject matter expert in the SIPOC and systems thinking methodologies. So some of the ways that you would be able to qualify suppliers or reference checks, site visits I recommend, get some samples from them, get a few samples and look at how they're delivered. If you put some type of, I recommend you put some type of, you simulate, what you call it, a delivery situation, and you look at how those samples come in, and you look at how they came into you. That could be another good method. And of course, a pilot program. You start off small, and you have them. If you're testing a new supplier that in all other parameters they seem to qualify, financial, etc. And you do especially if it's a sensitive input, you do a small scale delivery or pilot run. You could do a couple of them, and then you scorecard how well you did. And I would involve, what I normally do in this situation, I involve the commodity team, and we come up with a consensus that yes, we're gonna this particular supplier meets our requirements. They're a qualified supplier, and we could do business with them, right? And of course, financial statement analysis. In the last webinar, we spoke about Altman Z-score and the other parameters too that you could look at in terms of your profit and loss statements, the balance sheet, and of course their cash flow statement. If you have suppliers that are strapped for cash, they have negative cash flows, this would not be a good situation, would not be a sustainable situation for you. And so it's very, very, very important that we look at the financials, because if they're financially strapped, they're not going to be able to sustain you the high quality inputs delivered on time, meeting specification, and with that degree of consistency that your customers will demand. So if your customers are demanding consistency, then the procurement function, all of the functions in your organization have to be consistent in executing their functions, and your suppliers have to be consistent. So the whole supply chain, modern supply chain, there's a demand for consistency, consistently being low cost, consistently being quick and agile, and consistently yielding outputs that are high quality. And we go on to best practice number 4. We're going to focus on 4 for this one, and we'll do maybe 5 on the next webinar. But best practice number 4, managing supplier performance. So after we have qualified and selected the right suppliers, then we have to go with the understanding, with the old saying, what gets measured, gets managed, gets done. Another saying is that if you don't measure it, you don't manage it effectively. So once we have ensured that we have the right suppliers and we qualified all our suppliers in place, then we have to continuously measure them and continuously look in a very collaborative manner for ways that we could improve the value chain. We reflect on ourselves, our departments, our organizations. We reflect internally, and we look outwardly to our customers, how we could help them improve their processes and their ordering and their patterns, because their patterns would affect the demand supply dynamics. Okay, so and then we go upstream and we collaborate with our suppliers to see how we could improve. But managing performance is very important. Now, I recommend that you ask yourselves these 5 questions, right? Which suppliers will we rate? What personnel and organization will participate in the rating process? What performance measures will we use? How will we collect the data? And how will we use the data? Because many times we collect data and we don't use it effectively. Or many times, how will we collect the performance data. If it takes more than a few minutes to collect and to understand, it's too cumbersome. So we don't want to be slaves to collecting data. We'll have to collaborate with our IT departments and figure out ways to have this data that's easy to handle but is insightful. So we have to figure out ways to simplify the data collection process. And we would have to, of course, design a very robust data collection plan with data that's high impact, high value, significant, but simple and easy to extrapolate. Of course, and I'm working my way back up, what performance measures will we use? Of course, the cost, absolutely. Delivery, what percentage of the deliveries are on time? Because for suppliers, if they deliver your inputs late, it impacts and it could be disruptive to your processes. Imagine getting the right amount of product, getting the right quality of product, but delivered late. And imagine if you have hundreds of people at your conversion process waiting for materials. Picture the cost and how that would negatively impact the total cost of ownership. Are your suppliers eco-friendly? To measure those aspects, carbon print, etc., is important. And how responsive they are. You always want to make sure that they're very responsive. If there's some error, that they're quick and they're agile and they could respond quickly. Also, who would be part of the rating process? Again, I would involve the commodity team. Now we see how important the commodity team is and that concept. If you have a large amount of suppliers, again, we could leverage the 80-20 rule. Right? So 20% on the premise that 20% of the suppliers would have approximately 80% of the impact on your organization and on your value chain and on your value stream. So if you have a huge amount of suppliers, yes, we focus on the top 20%. Also, there's a 450 rule, which is a variation of the 80-20 rule, which 4% of your suppliers, this is also a power law as well. The 80-20 rule is a power law. 4% of your suppliers constitute 50% of the impact on your supply chain, positive or negative. So 4% of your suppliers constitute 50%. So I would laser focus there in the 450 and then roll it up to the 80-20 spectrum. So the first layer of focus would be the 450, leveraging the 450 rule, and then move full scale to the 80-20 rule. So you're going to focus on 4% first. Make sure you have good, cleansed, pertinent data that's easy to collect, that's insightful, and then focus on the next 16% of that spectrum of the 20% of suppliers that you're going to focus on. In terms, if you have a large supplier base, you could have hundreds. Some companies have hundreds or thousands of suppliers. Okay, so that is our webinar for today. I hope that you all enjoyed it. Please give me some feedback. I'm going to leave the floor open now for some Q&A. Do I have any questions over what we have covered so far? On the matter of best practice number 4, the goal. Make sure that we view each one of these best practices and there's a goal. So the goal on collecting supplier performance data is to collect the data, to analyze it, and to use it. Please make sure we utilize the data. Please make sure that we leverage those dashboards and we are able to make decisions to mitigate risk and to improve how we service our internal customers and our external customers. So make sure there's a goal behind the practice and to be able to get buy-in. One of the best ways to get buy-in is leveraging that commodity team and you could roll out a number of these best practices at once or one at a time. Again, in conjunction with your commodity team. So that's one of the first things that I would establish if you don't have one in your organization, and make them aware of the benefits of these best practices, and get consensus on how you would deploy those best practices over time. So I'm open to Q&A. If you could send me questions in the chat box, I'll appreciate it. If you have any questions. And I hope you all enjoyed today's webinar. Apologies for the late start. We're going to get better at this over time. I promise you that. No questions. My number is 860-994-8193. So 860-994-8193. I'm pretty much have open schedule. If I'm not able to call you back, if I don't pick up the phone right away, I would leave a message and I'll call you back. So we could set up, if you would like, Deborah, you want to set up some sessions where you need some coaching. We could do that as well, and we could do it maybe Skype. Might be a good medium, or GoToMeeting could be another medium that we could leverage for that. So this way I could sort of coach you and help you engage and deploy and integrate this material. Does that sound good? Sure. Is it this class, Deborah? Okay. So you have my email? Yes. Shoot me an email. Anytime, anything you want to deploy. This is why we're here, and we're very passionate about what we do to make you better. I know you all are great at what you do, but to continuously have material where you all could continuously improve what you do, and to raise the bar to be world-class procurement professionals. This is why we're here. So we want to enable you to deploy what you learn at your workplace. Okay, so I don't think I have any more questions. So I'm going to stop the recording. Again, thank you very much for attending today's webinar. And I look forward to tomorrow. We have webinar on procurement goals for 2019. You should attend that. I hope that one will be a powerhouse. Okay, thank you so much and have a great day. Yes, I will.